Hello, I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast, Taking Care of Business today with Vince Guzzo, who is a entrepreneur, well-known entrepreneur in Quebec, also a dragon on Dragon's Den television show. Thanks a lot for joining us today, Vince.
Thank you for having me again.
Well, let me ask you in general, how would you describe the state of entrepreneurship in this country today?
I would tell you that, I mean, the spirit of entrepreneurship is alive and kicking. But I would tell you that there are troubled waters right now, and I guess we're all hoping that 2024 is the end of a tornado, and that things are going to start calming down, and interest rates are going to go back down, and banks are going to be a little less number crunching and more logical. COVID is over, but the impact and the consequences of COVID are not over. And I believe that one of the decision from the Prime Minister's office today was that he would not be extending the CEBA loans.
Yeah.
So that's not a lot of money per entrepreneur per se, but not every entrepreneur has $60,000 readily available or can make those payments over 3 years. I mean, everybody needs to realize that, debt is debt, and debt that was acquired without any, I guess, equipment or asset or cash flow positivity from it is doubly negative debt.
Yeah. When you're looking at entrepreneurs, you mentioned the CEBA loans that are due on January 18th. You meant, there's also all these different taxes that entrepreneurs face, increases in payroll taxes, increase in carbon tax, all that type of stuff. And then, of course, the costs of doing business. How do these entrepreneurs survive in these times?
Well, it's a question of reinventing, and the real problem is that uh, there's a lot of, what I like to say is there's a lot of new technology coming in, making being an entrepreneur easier.
Yeah.
And nobody really realizes that every new technology coming in that costs you an extra 1%, 2% in processing fees, et cetera, is a direct attack to your bottom line, right? And unless you can increase the cost of your product, well, then you're absorbing that increased cost. And the real problem is that, and we saw it this year in the movie industry, while everybody's tooting, that movies are back and everything's going to be great and brick and mortar is back, all of a sudden, there's people who never believed in brick and mortar that are now coming back and believing that brick and mortar is back. People don't want to, stay at home, and even if they just have to walk in a large surface store and intertwine with other people, they'd rather do that than do the online stuff. But the problem is that insecurity is in the air. I mean, people are making today payments on their homes, which is equivalent to what they were doing 12 months ago, but that's only to cover the interest.
Yeah.
It no longer covers the capital, right? And now people are, when you've had an extended period of 10 years or even 12 years of amazing low interests, and the money was flowing, COVID was a reminder, but to be ready. But I don't think anybody saw it as we're going to get ready. And I think that 2023 was the bad year for everybody. I mean, everybody is, I would say a lot of small entrepreneurs are all asset rich, very cash flow poor. And I always like to say when I was cash flow rich, my banks wanted assets. Then I became asset rich and they wanted cash flow, right? And so I'm sitting there and I go, what is it exactly? And so it's that perfect balance between the two. Like I said, I mean, we're going through a transition. Banks have changed. After 20 years, I'm in the process of changing bank. So, you've got to find the right financial partners. And in troubled waters, I think entrepreneurs need to remember that, their best friend is the the financial partner that actually believes in them, and not the financial partner that believes in what the computer's telling them to do and check a box and you got to
Yeah.
fit in this box.
Yeah. With all those challenges out there, are you surprised that not more businesses have shut their doors here in the last years or so?
I have a feeling that, a lot of people have really dug deep and used a lot of their own money, and they've tried in any way possible not to have to declare bankruptcy. But I have a feeling that 2024, Q1 of 2024 may be challenging. And there's a reason why the Bank of Canada is announcing that, early spring, it intends on dropping interest rates. I mean, I would do it earlier than later, but
Yeah.
you can't force them to do anything. So, but I have a feeling that they're going to have to, uh, um, in other words, I think that the bankruptcy rates will be at an all-time high Q1.
Hmm.
That's unfortunately my guess on this. Will those people be able to restructure and quickly come out of it? Possibly. Many of them, you got to remember, we're talking about the CEBA loans, but there were the has-capped loans, and there was a whole bunch of loans that were, non-guaranteed, which the government, if the government wants to squeeze, it can squeeze. But I mean, a lot of people will just go belly up and reopen,
Yeah.
under a different name, and the government will still lose the money. The only thing that'll happen is everybody's going to have, a blemish on their credit reports.
Yeah. Well, the other aspect of it is even in this tough environment, we're seeing a lot of businesses that open up, right? That surprised you.
Well, I mean, look, I mean, I think the human spirit is, an entrepreneurial spirit is such that, Michelle and Manjeet and I often say this: you've got to be a little bit of a maverick and a risk taker to even think about being an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And sometimes the correlation between, intelligence and risk taking isn't always, it's not linear. It's not, so, sometimes we get worried. I can tell you that most entrepreneurs that I've had the opportunity to look at financial statements for, through investments or whatever, a bit like ourselves, our debt is strictly COVID related debt. We have no operational debt that doesn't come from those, call it 2.5 years of COVID.
Yeah.
Because it took about 2.5 years to actually get back to some form of normality. Then some industries got hit harder than others, like the restaurant industries. The last Q in Quebec have been hit very hard. The movie theater industry has been hit hard. Worst Christmas in the history of the industry. But, it's not a question of, are people not going to go back to theaters? I think the question was that we just came out of COVID. We had July, August, which were 25 points pre-COVID, up on pre-COVID numbers, which were amazing. And then we get September with a writer's strike, and then actors want, be solidarity to the writers. And so now movies are moving. And the Dune that had to be at Christmas now goes to March.
Yeah.
It makes a difference. That's a easily a $500 million movie in 2 weeks that's gone out of Christmas, and it's gone to March, right? And so while that's, the nice thing about the movie business is what you don't get today, you're going to get tomorrow because you just moved the movie over. The fact of the matter is the cash flow is needed today. It's not needed tomorrow necessarily, right? And so everybody's having, I would tell you, everybody's having a hard time. But there's always light at the end of the tunnel, right? There's only so much pain that somebody can take until things got to turn around. Mary, you remember me saying once, I think on one of your previous shows, when you think you're in hell, you continue walking. Why the hell would you want to just stay still in hell? Just continue walking. You'll eventually get out of it. Or, my latest one is, I asked one of my sons, I said, what would you do if you were, in the middle of a field and you see a tornado's coming towards you?
Yeah.
Right. And half of the kids said, well, we'd turn around and run the opposite way. I said, really? Well, okay. And he said, well, what would you do? I'd run straight for that tornado. And he says, well, what do you mean? Well, if I run to it and then I get through it, I'm done. if I'm running away from it, it's following me. It's going to follow me for a while,
True.
right? So I'm going to have to face that tornado for a long, the threat of it for a long time behind me, right? So
True.
sometimes you just gotta snip what it is that needs to be snipped and move on with it.
Yeah. What do you think governments have to do today to help small businesses?
Look, I really think that, and I really believed that the government was going to just eventually just turn around and write off all of the, SIBA loans, all of those house cap loans, all of that craziness, because I thought they were intelligent enough to realize that they created the problem and that
Yeah.
they would take some accountability for it, right? But doesn't look like that's what they're going to do. I think all of a sudden, we're going to go from a fairly left-wing way of thinking, and all of a sudden somebody wants, I guess the PM's office wants to tell us that he's fiscally prudent all of a sudden, but it's going to be on the back of entrepreneurs and of Canadians, right? And so I never understood, why the whole craziness of COVID, but it carried on, and even look, it's not a secret. I was one of the ones that was being called by once in a while from the central bank and being asked, what did I think about increasing interest rates? And I said, you guys are not understanding that in theory, right? Because I'm an economist, in theory, yeah, you increase interest rates, you're going to slow down the the growth of business, the growth of the industry or the market, and inflation will be under control. The problem is that inflation wasn't out of control. Inflation was high because the transport sector was taking advantage, right? And so by increasing interest rates, we didn't reduce gas costs. We didn't decrease energy costs. We didn't increase. In fact, because of the indebtedness of most entrepreneurs, I would tell you that the minute interest rates went up, everybody upped their prices, right? So movie prices went up in the last 24 months. Why? Because it has to offset the increased interest rate charges that we now have. By consequence, you're slowing down the market economy, but you're upping the cost of all other goods, right? So it wasn't that surprising that inflation wasn't dropping as quickly as everybody thought. In the meantime, I think that the only real people that, if I could say, benefited is it may be the banks, by charging higher interest rates, but not necessarily paying out higher interest rates on your savings, right? So, and that's where the issue is. So I think the spread was better for them. But hey, sometimes if your financial partner is better off, so are you. But it's not always the case.
Yeah. From I guess from a personality kind of standpoint, what does it take to be an entrepreneur, especially now?
I was explaining to my kids. I spent a lot of time with my kids in 2023. During the summer, I spent 5 weeks away with them, and then during the Christmas holidays, I spent 2 weeks away with them. And one of the things I tried to explain to them, that an entrepreneur is basic. I did the analogy with working out, and I said, why is it that a human's willing to go into a gym and suffer the pain of muscle sore and so forth and so forth, working out for his health? Well, being an entrepreneur is basically the same thing, only it's about the stress level, and it's about the mental, the impact on your mental health, and the amount of endurance and the amount of torture you can take from the stress. Because that's what it really is. Being an entrepreneur is about handling the ups and downs, the roller coaster, right? And I would tell you that it's facing the fears, that other people are not willing to face, right? People who, I always like to say, people who have a job 9 to 5 are no smarter or dumber than an entrepreneur. They just don't want to take the risk. And they don't want to live with the anxiety and the stress of the risk taking of A, putting maybe their own capital on the table, B, putting their name and reputation on the table, and C, getting calls that payments are late or this or that, or I always I used to tell a banker of mine every once in a while, every year he would ask me for my forecasts and I would give them to him. And then at the end of the year, we'd go over it. Every time I was off, where I performed less than I expected to perform, he would point it out to me. Every time I overperformed, he never pointed it out to me. And I said, this is the most ungrateful relationship I'm in. He says, what do you mean? Well, it's worse than a marriage, because when I do good, my wife once in a while tells me, I'm happy, you did good. You never tell me I did good. You just tell me, hey, how come you didn't meet your ratios this time? Or how come you didn't do this? When I meet everything and I'm over, I get no gratitude from you. Like, seriously, man, I need some more love from you, right? And I mean, we were joking, but it is the ungratefulness of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. It's not for the faint of heart.
And it's not, I mean, if you're looking for compassion and if you're looking for somebody to, to be supportive and somebody to sort of understand you, being an entrepreneur, I mean, you're going against the grind here. I mean, I've argued with banks, and when I overperformed, they just said, well, you got lucky. Or they just said, well, it doesn't matter. We don't understand we don't understand that business. So it's okay that we were wrong. Right. But we're still not going to, I had a banker once tell me that he knew nothing about the movie business. If I was in the shrimp business, that business he understood. And I scratched my head and I said, are you telling me that you have more faith in the fishery business, which is the most subsidized industry in Canada, for the movie industry? And he goes, yeah. Oh my God, I think I got to change bank. And I changed financial partner at that time. But you understand, it's not easy to, that's why on Dragon's Den, we often say, you got to be a salesman. You got to be able to pitch your idea. You've got to be able to make us believe in what you're telling us. Because we know that that's the problem. That is the problem we all face with banks, with partners, with institutions, with landlords or whatever. I mean, and to be honest, I know what I'm going through these days with a lot of, my partners and everything. And I tell myself, that small entrepreneur who's, renting space from a landlord who's over leveraged, and he thought he was going to pay 2.5%, 3% forever, and now he's paying 7%, 8%. That rent, as little as it may be, is crucial for that landlord, and they're pushing hard. I mean, they're really pushing hard, and landlords need to understand that the same way banks need to understand, you can only squeeze a lemon so much until there's nothing left to squeeze.
Yeah, exactly. And last thing I was going to ask you, like, if you're an entrepreneur and don't have the passion for it, especially what you're doing, you're pretty much toast, aren't you?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, a lot of people don't realize it maybe, but entrepreneur has to be synonymous of passionate in what you want to do. I mean, if you think you're going to be an entrepreneur as a 9-to-5 worker, right, it's either you inherited the company, from somebody and you think you're just coasting, right, because you're lucky enough to have this one widget that only you produce and the whole world needs, or you're gonna get blown out of the water eventually, just because, I mean, it's I once met, I think she was my grade 4, grade 5 teacher a few years before COVID, while I think it was my second year on Dragon's Den, and she said to me, I really thought you would never amount to anything. I thought you were like a major troublemaker, and I thought, you were going to like eventually just, be a crook or something, right? And I laughed and I said, you know what kept me out of trouble? Being an entrepreneur, because I had no time in my day, apart from sleeping, working, and maybe trying to spend some time with my family, to actually do anything that got me in trouble. And so it's a life mission. I think I've said this to you in the past. When I travel, I have one luggage that is my office. it literally comes along with me at all times, and wherever I am, beach, no beach,
Yeah.
snow slopes, no snow slopes, I'm working for that 5, 6, 7 hours a day. I have no choice. I need to, and if I don't do it, I literally feel guilty. I almost
Yeah.
feel like it's as if the anxiety goes up and says
Yeah.
like I didn't do my job today.
Yeah. No, I hear you. All right. Well, thanks very much, Vince, for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Mary. Always a pleasure.
All right, super. That was Vince Guzzo, who is a well-known Quebec entrepreneur and a dragon on Dragon's Den television show. I'm Mario Toneguzzi, managing editor of Canada's podcast, Taking Care of Business. Thanks for joining us today.